Hi, Base Gardener here, and today I want to talk about the hippies. Okay, and I'm going to make the claim that the hippies have fundamentally betrayed our culture and our society in the West. So let's look at the hippies. Really, it's a movement that goes back quite far. I'm sure you could trace it back even farther than I will, but let's say you know it, we can say it started. You've got the French Revolution, you've got Rousseau's noble savage concept, that humanity is fundamentally good, but it's then corrupted by society. You've got like the bohemian artists in France, the romantic poets, Wordsworth and such in Britain. These are all kind of like precursor movements to what we today think of as the hippies. And I would say that the hippies are kind of like the ultimate expression of those ideas and those movements. Um, and so, what are the hippies? They're like basically people who believe in freedom of expression, free love. They're highly creative types, very artistic. There's a lot of postmodernism. The exchange of kind of new and interesting ideas. And I have a lot of love for the hippies. These are basically the people who raised me. I think both of my parents could fairly be described as at least adjacent to that movement, if not hippies themselves. They lived actually on a beach squat in a place called Sombrio Beach. It was just a little community, had no road access. You basically had to hike or paddle in, and it was just a bunch of hippies that kind of lived in a little kind of village structure on the beach. They built huts out of beech wood. They raised chickens and goats, and they had kids there, and the whole thing. And I was actually born after that time period, but I lived in a similar way throughout much of my childhood. And you know what? I met some incredible characters. A lot of really interesting people, artists, creators of various types, really smart people. And it was a really interesting childhood, unique. But there was also a lot of dark sides to it that I saw as a kid. And, so there was things like, drug use, of course, right? In, around, sometimes with children. And other stuff too. I mean, there was, of course, there's the sexual promiscuity, all the weirdness around that you see with the hippies, and there's a lot of just Marxism, the social justice stuff that made its way in there. A lot of full on commies, of course. The hippies were always very left leaning and sometimes very far left, and so you had this kind of revolutionary element that was always kind of close to those circles. um, and then there's also a bit of an infatuation with like the demonic, sometimes full on Satanists that were part of that community as well. That's no joke. I mean, I've seen that firsthand myself, and something that, yeah, I always saw that kind of that dark side of the hippie movement as well. Although I'm not suggesting that they're all like that at all. Um, and so I would say that in a lot of ways, many of the kind of darker movements that you see on the left in our society today have their roots in the hippie movement. I think it's a pretty easy point to demonstrate. So here I want to point out a kind of fundamental contradiction that I see with the hippies. Okay, and I pointed this out in a previous video, but so let's say that in many ways the hippies always kind of stood against the man, if you will, right? So what's that? It's like, whatever. It's our institutions. It's law enforcement. It's the military. The government. Really, I would say in many ways our society itself. It's a very critical movement when it comes to society. This is a counterculture. This is a group of people who are set apart from the rest of society, kind of inherently, right? And right from the days of the Vietnam War, you really had people who were very critical of basically the whole fundamental structure of their society. And here's the contradiction, right? Because the only way that you can give birth to a movement like this is in the free, liberal, prosperous, tolerant West. There's really no other time or place in human history where you could have a group of people who can spend their days smoking weed and painting, or deciding that they want to hitchhike across the country at the drop of a hat. Um, and I see that as a real contradiction, because these people are eager to tear down the society that uh, enables their very existence, right? So, and now I want to say that a level of this is actually healthy. I think the West, in many ways, thrives on having this kind of counterculture element. It almost serves to kind of keep the society honest in many ways, pointing out the flaws. These very smart, creative types who can kind of envision different ways that society can go, and that can inspire the rest of us, and so on and so forth. I think that's good. But in many ways, it's gone off the rails. Like what I've noticed is a lot of the older hippies now, like the people who really were hippies back in the 60s and 70s, these are the people now who are literally calling for the downfall of the West. They're quite literally rooting for their own destruction without a hint of irony. I mean, to me, it's absolutely crazy, and it shows that whatever flaws there were in the genesis of this movement, they really have become full fissures now that have just threatened the entire idea and really tarnished its legacy, I think, forever now. Um, so I want to point out that for me, I still, in many ways, think of myself as a little bit of a hippie. I mean, the lifestyle I lead, where I'm kind of living out in the middle of nowhere, gardening and playing music and stuff. I mean, but I envision a future for something like the hippies that is just very different. That is rooted in a profound respect and love for the culture that gave it its birth. And that retains a lot of those positive elements. Like it's good to be critical in some ways. It's good to show different ways that people can live their lives that aren't so focused on materialism and consumerism. It's good to be creative. It's good to believe in freedom of expression. These are good things, and things that I want to embrace as an individual. But I hope that collectively this group can kind of grow up. You know, it's a petulant attitude to be living high off the hog, and then constantly complaining about everything, and wanting to destroy the very society that gives you such a good standard of living. Anyway, that's how the hippies betrayed the West, in my humble opinion. Those are my thoughts. Take care.